So first, I'd like to thank the organizers of this webinar for inviting me to make this presentation within the framework of the perspective of young professionals in sustainable river management. I'm going to talk about my work as the project manager for Natura 2000 in the Lower Valley. I'll begin with briefly presenting my professional path. I started in studying science and moved into the professional world. I was a study engineer at the ENS on engineering, ecological engineering. Then I got my PhD in ecology at the EcoVid lab in Rouen. So looking at the role of ponds and their landscape context in maintaining ecological continuity. So the aim, I studied Odonata in the green way and the blue way. And then I worked with the Agence de l'eau and Seine Maritime and the Hunting Federation. Then I worked for a year at the University of Versailles, teaching in at the master's level and BA level. Then I have my postdoctorate degree from IRSTIA, optimizing the configuration of woody riparian buffer strips along rivers to enhance biodiversity and ecosystem services. So this was in partnership with the research teams in Germany and Norway. And now I'm a project manager for the Natura 2000 site in the lower valley of Ain. So I've switched from academic work to more applied work. And so my studies have really made it possible to feed my professional work. This Natura 2000 site is managed by the River Syndicate of the downstream and its tributaries. It was created in January 1st, 2018. It's a public establishment serving the general interests of the territory. So it's a syndicate that's in charge of managing the aquatic environments, biodiversity, water resources, and flood prevention. I work on the biodiversity side. This syndicate manages the Natura 2000 site here. So this syndicate covers 1,700 square kilometers with 1,300 kilometers of rivers and 150,000 inhabitants. What is Natura 2000? It's one of the fundamental tools of European policy to preserve biodiversity. It takes into account in a better way the challenges of biodiversity in relationship to human activities. The aim is to preserve biodiversity and the natural heritage while taking into account economic, social, and cultural demands on the territories, and in particular these Natura 2000 sites. So here's a map at the European scale shared between the different countries. You see Germany has a lot of Natura 2000 sites. So my Natura 2000 site is the Lower Ain Valley. It's in the northeast of Lyon, the central eastern part of France. So it has the river and the banks of the river. So I can show you a few photos of the site. It has a wide variety of landscapes in Europe. It's one of the last dynamic rivers, and so it has, it's very favorable to the development of biodiversity and preservation in Europe at the Natura 2000 site. So we have alluvial forests that will be able to host nesting birds. You also have dry grasslands where we get great biodiversity of vegetation, including orchids. We have the active river where there are fish, lots of fish. There are also wetlands that are oxbows where we have reproduction sites for fish like the European brook lamprey. And then we have something that's also characteristic of the site. We have gravel beds, banks, where a lot of birds tend to nest. So it's a very important site at the European scale with a lot of different types of habitat and biodiversity. This site, unfortunately, is subject to pressure, and I'm presenting 5, 1 per type of area. So we'll focus mostly on the waterway. So we've seen that the sinking and riverbed erosion, the oxbows are being deconnected from the rivers, and we're overuse of the gravel banks. So we're seeing more sinking and erosion of the riverbed. The level is going down. This process is due to 2 phenomena: the pastoral practices with the hardwood forests along the river bank, and we're also seeing a disappearance of the sediment load. The sediment is blocked upstream with a whole series of hydropower dams upstream of the river. So to prevent sinking and erosion, we have been refilling with sediment, and in the next 10 years, we have a new program to inject small stones also along and in the river. The second pressure is the deconnection of our oxbows. The aim of the last DOCOB was to restore the different facies of these oxbows. There were 9 oxbows that were restored between 2004 and 2011, and there are also inventories of the fauna, the flora, and the geomorphology in 37 oxbows between 2003 and 2012. There was no real in-depth study on these aquatic environments near the river, so in 2021, in partnership with another organization, we launched a loan plan, this oxbow plan, to look at the state of conservation of these oxbows as the parts of the Natura 2000 site, to identify needs for restoration in the oxbows, and to have to make proposals for prioritized actions to see if we need to reconnect the oxbow to the river, for example. The third pressure was the overuse of the Natura 2000 site with some instability and illegal hunting. During the summer season, we see a lot of people who come and swim, and there's also motorized traffic and people parking on the banks of the river. There was quite a bit of biodiversity here, so we can understand that the presence of vehicles could really be harmful for biodiversity. We've also seen accumulation of waste along the river, and a lot of aquatic recreational activities like kayak on the river. It's a dynamic river, so it's very attractive for this type of sport. So for the SR3A to limit the use of the banks, we prepare the summer season with the departments of the state, the prefecture, the DDT, the National Forestry Office, and the police. And we have awareness-raising panels that we've put up, 80 of these signs in the 20 municipalities that are concerned. So to transfer information about the Natura 2000 site. We're also trying to manage motorized traffic. We've set up blocks and even barriers to prevent the motorized vehicles from accessing the river. And we're also working on managing waste. We have a team coming in every Monday to collect the waste that is left, unfortunately, by the riverside. So in terms of my strong points, in terms of the work I do for the syndicate, I have a university background, so my strong points are really a solid knowledge of ecology with the concept theories and the taxonomic groups. So I have a lot of information about aquatic macroinvertebrates. I can also be a relay person between the professional world and the research world when we have to talk about scientific protocols or the Natura 2000 site are also to understand the statistical analyses that we need for the syndicate. I also have a lot of experience in communication and making information accessible to the general public. And I've managed a project from the beginning to end with a scientific approach, starting with a hypothesis, method, results, conclusions. So I know how to run projects of this type. But I also have weaknesses for the syndicate. And these are weaknesses I'm trying to overcome over time. That I didn't really know how the river syndicates worked with the regional technical agents. And I wasn't used to working with the water agencies either, with elected officials. I'm having some difficulty learning how to do my administrative tasks, including public tendering and the documents that are required by the state. I did work on a public tender for the on River, and also the connection with the different actors in the territory. It's difficult when you start this type of job to try to take into account all of the background actors that are involved. The obstacles to my mission as the manager of the Natura 2000 project, these are not real obstacles, but I consider them more like challenges. And you have to take this in mind when you're in charge of a Natura 2000 site. We have to reconcile the different uses on the area. I've listed some: tourism, agriculture, hunting, and fishing. There are things that are incompatible with the tourism that can get in the way of the fishermen. There are also multiple actors in the territory: elected officials, the environmental associations, EDF, our national electricity utility, and there are also the services of the state. They don't all have the same vision and challenges in the territory, so we need to reconcile all of the uses of these actors. On the right side, I put this graph representing the Natura 2000 site with the bubble representing SR3A. We're just one bubble amongst a multitude of bubbles involved in this area. Another obstacle that I could talk about as a manager of the Natura 2000 site is that people are really unfamiliar with the Natura 2000 policies. And some people are not even aware that it's a Natura 2000 site with the stakes involved for preserving the environment and biodiversity. Some stakeholders see us as people who are stopping projects with a very legislative and regulatory aspect, rather than people who are working with them to help them with their projects on the site to foster the social economy while preserving biodiversity, which is really the objective of the Natura 2000 policy. We can also see that there's a gap between the objectives of the project manager, which is to preserve biodiversity, and the expectations of the municipality. We have problems with the overuse of the river and incivility. Then lastly, we have problems with precarious contracts. A lot of people in this role have fixed-term contracts like me. It's a 3-year contract. While I'm carrying out work that is long-term to revise our project for the next 10 years. So I'm setting up an action plan for the next 10 years without being sure of being able to manage it because of my contract. So I talked about the obstacles. Now I'd like to talk about the drivers or the levers. The first one that I would talk about is communication about the Natura 2000 site. This is very important to get people to be aware of the site and its challenges. As I said earlier, we put up signs in the municipality. It's also important to set up a website to present the Natura 2000 site, and why not hand out brochures? I've also made presentations in tourist office to talk about Natura 2000 in the region. The second driver could be carrying out actions with twofold objectives. As the manager of the Natura 2000 site, with the elected officials, for instance, the setting up of barriers, the aim was to protect the biodiversity on the site, limiting the excessive presence on the river. And the aim of setting up the barriers for the municipality was to limit random parking on the Natura 2000 site. So the two objectives are not opposed, protecting biodiversity and limiting the too much traffic. They go together and they work well on the Natura 2000 site. Other drivers reinforce the dynamics while taking advantage of the revision of our objective document, the DOCOB. So this defines the actions in the next 10 years on the site. So the DOCOB revision will allow us to set up a steering committee and thematic workshops involving the different stakeholders and users of the site to create synergies and to move things forward on the Natura 2000 site. And then the last lever driver would be to supporting the municipalities with their land use management, the river management. So they call on us as representatives of Natura 2000 to work on the projects involving the banks in their municipalities and also to preserve biodiversity. Thank you for your attention.